Women's Day, we at Lung Care Foundation are focusing on the role of women leaders in climate change and health, a much needed topic, a much needed issue that we all need to talk about, need to fight against, and need to be together for. Women have been taking up leadership role since time immemorial. We are professionals, we are mothers, wives, sisters, daughters, and more importantly, we are beings who have the ability to achieve every goal that we set our eyes on. During the present climate crisis that the world is facing, it is heartening to have the global leaders like Christiana Figueres, Greta Thunberg, Rihanna Gunn-Wright, Kate Marvel, and our very own Sunita Narayan, Medha Patkar, Vandana Shiva, Lucy Priya, the ladies who started the Chipko movement, and many, many more unsung women heroes who have taken up the issue and are fighting for the cause. Today, we have amongst us a similar stellar panel of renowned women leaders from across the sectors who are here to share their experience and inspire us to work for health and climate change issues. Before I introduce them, I would like to brief about the campaign that we take up this week. We have taken up this week. It's called We at Change. We started this 7-day campaign under the Saaf Hawa Aur Nagarik program, which is SHAN, supported by the US Embassy in collaboration with Warrior Moms, a Mothers for Clean Air Collective, United Residents Joint Action or URJA Group, the Shriram College of Commerce, Bhakta Bharat, an NGO working with the underprivileged children, Doctors for Clean Air, and the Breathe Easy Stay Tough school clubs. Beginning from the 1st of March, each day was dedicated to women from a particular sector like mothers, college girls, women leaders of the RWAs, school students, mentors, principals, and other working professionals. The campaign is a very small effort to acknowledge and appreciate the immense work that is being done by these climate and health warriors working towards making the world a better, cleaner, and safer place to be. These videos are currently available on all social media platforms of Lung Care Foundation, including Facebook and Twitter. There have been some amazing responses, and we are proud to say that these 7 videos of women leaders who are working very hard in their own different sectors, in their own different ways, are doing wonderfully well on the social media. And it gives us immense pleasure to be associated with these women. In the next 70 minutes, you all will be hearing 5-minute nano keynote addresses from our esteemed guests today. And after that, there will be an open house. As part of the open house, all the participants are encouraged to share their questions, comments, and views on the theme using the feature. You can raise a hand that's available on Zoom, and you will be able to unmute yourself and speak once we call out your name. We encourage you to please come forward, share your experiences, share your views, and most importantly, share the future ahead, what the plans that you have or the strategies that you think will work. So that open house is open for all of you, and please feel free to be here, to be present here, and to be a part of this discussion. With that, I introduce our esteemed panelists today, Ms. Kachina Chawla, Richa Upadhyay, Seema Arora, Dr. Rachna Hazarika, Dr. Professor Simrit Kaur, and Nilima Khaitan. Welcome to all of you. A big round of applause. It's time that I now introduce our first keynote speaker, Ms. Kachina Chawla. Kachina is a public health professional and a senior strategic information advisor to US Agency for International Development, USAID, India, where she works on digital technology, inclusive development, and other emerging priorities such as COVID-19 and urban resilience. She is a public health professional who has spent last 20 years working extensively across India in areas of maternal and child health, family planning, infectious diseases across 3 continents. Welcome, Kachina.
Thank you very much. Good evening, good afternoon, whatever the time is for you. Good day. I would like to just begin by thanking the Lung Care Foundation and its different partners who have put this together. I'd like to thank the panelists and participants for joining us today to celebrate the role that women play in climate change and health. On January 27th, President Biden issued an executive order on climate change to remind the world that there is no greater long-term challenge confronting us than climate change. India, as one of the world's largest carbon emitters, will be a critical part of any solution. Climate change affects health in innumerable ways. It exacerbates the frequency and severity of infectious diseases like malaria, dengue, chikungunya, but it also affects social determinants of health like clean water, sanitation, air pollution, food security, nutrition, just to name a few. The US government uses a whole of government approach to support the government of India as it tackles climate change and its health impacts. USAID, the Public Affairs Section, the Department of Health and Human Services, and many others continue to engage with policymakers, researchers, and frontline implementers in India, just like the Lung Care Foundation. Women have a long history of protecting our environmental assets, and Mathushri mentioned some of them, and therefore they are central to the climate change movement. One only needs to look at the Bishnoi women, the original tree huggers who sacrificed their lives to save Khetri trees in rural Rajasthan in 1730 and laid the foundation for the Chipko movement some 250 years later that Mathushri mentioned. That alone shows us that women are a formidable force. On the other side of the globe, we have pioneers like Rachel Carson, a Pennsylvania-born ecologist, before that science was even ever defined. She's one of the finest nature writers of the 20th century and plays her part in the contemporary environmental movement. This is particularly meaningful for me because the genesis of USAID India's work in air pollution began with 3 women from different departments with different roles: an engineer, a public health professional, an institution builder, came together, broke down traditional silos of health and energy and environment. They pushed the boundaries within USAID to elevate pollution and its health impacts to the highest level. And they engaged in deep, meaningful intersectoral collaboration, both within government, within our whole government, and then also beyond. Although some of the world's most prominent climate activists are women, as Mathushri just pointed out, women are also vulnerable to climate change. Climate change compounds existing economic inequities, and approximately 70% of those who live on less than $1 a day today are women. Women's roles as primary caregivers and providers of food and fuel in many parts of this world make them more vulnerable to flooding, drought, and other climate change effects. Gender-based barriers still limit women's access to land, financial services, social capital, and technology, rendering them even more vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Women are also at a heightened risk of food insecurity and violence, especially when resources become scarce. And when, as is too often the case, women are not involved in decision-making, they are less able to confront climate change and less likely to benefit from any of the mitigation efforts underway. Women, therefore, must be at the center of this global conversation. The We at Change campaign highlights the importance of women as change agents within their families, within their communities, but also well beyond. Societies that respect, promote, and defend gender equity, human rights, fundamental freedoms, and democratic institutions are more stable, secure, and are far better equipped to confront global challenges like climate change. I leave you with a quote from one of my daughter's heroes, the scientist and activist Jane Goodall. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make. Thank you. Over to you, Matashi.
Thank you, Katrina. Thank you so much for those wonderful words. I think really very inspiring. And the examples that you mentioned are truly people who have guided us in the past and are still guiding us in many of the actions that we are taking today across the world. Thank you so much. With that, I now would like to invite our next speaker for the day, Richa Upadhyay. Richa is currently the portfolio manager at Clean Air Fund, India, and also works on the campaigns across Clean Air Fund's various geographies. Prior to this, she was with Purpose as campaigns director in India. Richa developed the strategy for and managed staff to deliver all Purpose India campaigns and programs. She has overseen many successful air quality campaigns, including the My Right to Breathe campaign in Delhi, 100% UP campaign in Uttar Pradesh, and 100% Bihar campaigns on promotion of renewable energy. Richa, we are privileged to have you here in the webinar today.
Thank you so much, Mathushi, and thanks for the introduction. Thank you, Katrina, for that wonderful framing. And thank you to all the esteemed panelists today. I want to start off by a quote from Vandana Shiva, who is, of course, one of the greatest ecofeminists of our times. And she says, "We are either going to have a future where women lead the way to make peace with the earth, or we are not going to have a human future at all." And I thought that was a really apt quote to start this conversation. Although I have to say, I mostly agree with that quote, and I'll tell you why I don't fully agree with that quote. I would firstly replace the word women in the above quote with perhaps the word a feminine future, which is to say a future that is based on the principles associated with femininity, such as love, care, a perspective of the communal good, and one that protects the natural resources for our future generation. To me, these are the underlying values of the feminine future. And these values can be shared by both men and women, and it could be a collective vision for our planet. In my experience so far in the climate and clean air space, I see women's motivation to be part of these movements to be very, very clear. It is a motivation based on the communal good, one that has a vision of children of the future, and one that sees justice as a driving force for both the climate movement as well as the clean air movement. We see warrior moms popping up here in India. We see moms for clean air popping up in other parts of the world. And we see young women leading the climate justice movement everywhere. And that is not by chance. And there's no doubt that women are at the center of these movements. They are the driving force of these movements. And I am especially very proud to be part of the Clean Air Fund, which is mostly made up of very, very strong women leaders and who have taken one of the biggest challenges facing human history. As Katrina said, women are disproportionately impacted by both climate and air pollution. We have the burden, dual burden, sometimes triple burdens of class, caste, racial inequity, economic inequity, and these are all, and gender inequity, of course. And these are all challenges that women face every single day. I really want to thank all the women on this panel today and all the moms who are fighting for the healthy planet for the future generation. I think on this Women's Day, we have to particularly thank our women ancestors of the past and the young women of tomorrow. I see a whole new generation of young women who share values of justice and equality and who are standing in solidarity with each other. And at the same time, I also see a whole generation of young men who share these values with young women, who share the feminine values, and they're also standing in solidarity and paving the way for a better world. The solidarity and partnership that share this feminine future is truly what will save the human future. And so if I had the opportunity to sit with Vandana Shiva, I would say, should we not replace just women and actually be inclusive and include a shared feminine future that is shared by both men and women? And I think that is what is so brilliant about the movements that we see in front of us today. I really want to thank the esteemed panelists again, and I want to thank Lung Care Foundation for giving this opportunity to speak, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation with the rest of the audiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Richa, for this amazing perspective. I think it actually has helped us, I think it's all put us into a deep thought and to reflect upon what we think about our involvement and our role in this big issue of clean air, climate change, and health. Thank you so much. With that, our next speaker, I'd like to introduce Ms. Seema Arora, Principal Counselor and Head and Deputy Director General of CII. She is also has established the Environmental Management Division in CII and transformed the activities of the division into a Center for Excellence for Sustainable Development. Ms. Arora initiated the creation of corporate sustainability management framework for building sustainable business enterprises. Ma'am, the details are huge, and I am sorry if I have missed out anything, but I welcome you to be a part of the panel and to share your views. It will be our privilege to hear from you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Matushri, and thank you for the over-generous introduction, which was really not needed. I'm very delighted to be a part of this panel. Excellent views from Kachina and Richa already, triggering a lot of thought processes, and looking forward to hearing all of you. As Matushri actually mentioned, I represent the Confederation of Indian Industry. So my experience has largely been focused on sustainability and development. And if I look at climate issues with a gender lens, which I'm trying to do today on the International Women's Day, and actually we do that almost every day because I also look after the Indian Women Network, which is CII's network focusing only on women across the country. So I would just like to highlight the following things just for everybody to consider. And this has been said by others as well, that due to cultural norms, occupational and physical differences, men and women's consumption patterns differ. And at the same time, unsustainable production, waste generation, pollution often have distinct harmful impacts on women, particularly on those who are from the socially disadvantaged layers. And this happens through in various ways, especially from straining and shrinking natural resources on which they depend for subsistence, to poor labor conditions in the feminized workforce, as we see, to increasing amount of unpaid work related to waste management, and a greater involuntary and uninformed exposure to harmful products and chemicals. I believe that it's important that we look at how can we systematically incorporate the gender lens in this whole debate of climate, circular economy, right from the design, and understanding consumer behaviors, integrating lessons that are learned from traditional sustainable practices. And these traditional sustainable practices, actually, women are the holders often of this knowledge. And we need to leverage their knowledge and their understanding of the local value chains for sustainability. And this would not only ensure a just transition for all, but would also inform how to make the new economic paradigm operational and sustainable. I also want to mention about some work that we have been doing at the community level. I lead the CI Foundation as well. And I have found that, at the community level, solutions that we try and that we see are not always personal, but they're actually common. So solutions are come out from the realization that the challenge that one is facing is a common one across the community. And it needs, therefore, the solution also needs to be developed so that it can be a common solution that is accessible to everybody. So let me say that in one of the examples, and we work with rural women across the country who have actually overcome grave personal challenges and are moving to establish leadership within their communities. These are really the grassroots level women change makers, and I actually salute them daily, but much more on the days such as this. Many of these women are facing challenges that are related to climate, and I'll just like to take one example. And one example that comes to mind is that of a lady by the name of Sadhna Deshmukh, who's from rural Latur. Latur, as you know, in Maharashtra is a drought prone area. Sadhna found herself and her family in extreme poverty and on the verge of migration. That was basically because of drought. No crops apart from soya were being able to be grown because the water had really reduced. There was no rainwater coming. And the community was really struggling. And it was during one such perilous summer, Sadhna thought of developing soya products. She started doing so, and in the past 15 years, Sadhna's soya processing business spread to almost 10 villages, creating jobs and living for over 2,000 plus women for the last 6 years. She has given training to over 2,000 women and, more than 3,000 women at the village level, and almost 150 more women have become entrepreneurs. In this way, she has generated a source of employment and decent living for thousands of women. And what we do at CII is identify such women who are at the grassroots level, we mentor them, we provide them more resources, and we also connect them with industry so that their businesses can grow. Through our work, we are actually working with over 100 plus such grassroots level women. And they, along with their communities, are working to solve problems that they face because of this climate issue, and that impacts their health as well. In fact, the entire Solar Saheli model that all of you must be familiar is built on women understanding the problem and developing local sustainable solutions that make sense. I think this is the way to go forward. I really believe that this is the way to go forward because it is imperative that we make, and it was mentioned, that we make women a part of the solution. We just do not treat them as beneficiary, but co-designers of the solution. And in that way, we will actually ensure a proper uptake of the solution as well. So these are some of my thoughts, but happy to answer questions and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you, Matushri.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the examples that you have shared with us. And I think there are many, many more women like, the ones that you've mentioned, who are working tirelessly for ages, promoting, working tirelessly for their own families and for their own communities, and inspiring millions others. So I think it's hats off to the women force that we have. And thank you so much for sharing this. With that, I now invite Dr. Rashna Hazarika to share her experience as a medical professional. Dr. Rashna is a senior consultant, pediatrics and neonatology, emergency, critical care, pediatric allergy and respiratory diseases, infectious disease, pediatric rheumatology. And we are also proud to say that she's a clean air champion with Doctors of Clean Air Network. Ma'am, welcome to the webinar, and we hope to hear your views.
Thank you so much, Matushri, Lung Care Foundation, and to all the other esteemed panelists who are present here. When I was told to be a part of this program today, I really didn't know what to speak about. And then I thought, maybe I'll share some data with you regarding climate change and how it impacts health. About 25% of the world's children who die every year are from India. And that is a very horrifying statistics. If you look at it per day, we're losing one infant every day. every minute, as we are speaking also, this is happening. And what we have realized over the past few decades is that the number of premature births, the number of low birth weight babies are tremendously increasing in our country. And initially, as a health professional, we used to think it is only happening in the urban, metropolitan kind of ladies because of the late marriage, the late pregnancy, and the other stresses which are there with these women who are mostly working professionals. But we have also seen recently that many of the women who come from the villages are also facing similar problems. They have a very high incidence of premature births. The babies are very small. The cutoff for a birth weight for a baby in India is 2.5 kg at birth, but we find that many of these children are even less than that. They would be around 2 kg, sometimes even 1.8, and many still have stillbirths. So when we looked at the causes, we found that climate change is one of the most important reasons that many of our women, even from the villages, are having these kind of problems and contributing to so much of infant mortality and child mortality. Some of the most important ones are the biofuels that are being used even today in some of the houses, and thanks to the introduction of cooking gas in every household, which has happened, and I hope they continue using it. In fact, if I talk to people, I find that they do keep the cooking gas at home, but then the problem is the wood is so easily available that they still, try to save money and use the wood for fuel. And that is impacting the health of the fetus in a very, very bad way. So these are issues which when I have learned how to, communicate it to the parents, especially the mothers who come to me. And I try to tell them, in fact, it is the best change I have seen can occur only if it can influence the mother as well as the mother-in-law or the elderly ladies in the house, because they are the ones who are going to influence the change that will happen at the grassroots level. As some of you have said, yes, good things do happen, but it is only at the grassroots that we need to focus. So even in our practice, we find that one of the main change bearers are the women. When you tell them the side effects of the climate change, of the pollution, they are the ones who will take up steps to prevent that at home or in their villages. The second, I think, most important group which helps the pediatrician, the doctors in tackling climate change and the effects on health are the children themselves. As we have seen recently, there are so many child activists who are actively talking about climate change. And as a doctor, when I sit across and I have these young people coming to me and I talk to them, I find that many of them are very, very aware. And it is this group of people that we can talk one-to-one and lead to a lot of change which can occur. And as far as the theme of this year's Women's Day International celebration is concerned, is the challenge, is the gender equality. And I think, I feel that female leaders, whether they're in the health sector or in the other areas of work, they are a different class of leaders because they have an inherent sensitivity, they have creativity, and they can have nurturing attributes. So these are the three attributes: the creativity, the sensitivity, and the way we are, naturally we know how to nurture. So these are helpful in, taking up the responsibilities of negating the health impact of climate change on women and children. Thank you so much, Matushri and the Lung Care Foundation for giving me this opportunity. And I think much of the change we have also seen with the involvement of lung care as far as climate change is concerned. Thank you so much. I'll be happy to take up questions.
Thank you, Dr. Rashna. Thank you for those facts and some disturbing facts that you have shared. I think it's time that we all of us look into it with a more sharper lens and look at the solutions that we can, probably look at the very local level, at the very grassroots level. Thank you, Dr. Rashna. With that, I now invite our next speaker, who has decades of experience molding and grooming the youth. That's Dr. Professor Simrit Kaur, who is currently the principal of Sriram College of Commerce, University of Delhi, India. She's a professor of economics and public policy. She also guides research scholars on development economics and environmental economics, with one of her interest area being climate change. So, ma'am, we look forward to hearing from you your views on the climate change from an academic perspective.
Thank you so much. Heartiest compliments to all the ladies on this special day. I think as an economist, the basic objective of any policymaker would be growth which is inclusive and growth which is sustainable. So when we are talking of inclusivity, it could be across castes, it could be across gender, it could be across regions, it could be across the age structure. And at the same time, when we talk about the sustainability aspect of the growth, it is generally in terms of the climate change that is also the highlight of today's deliberation. We have seen that in our when we are trying to have growth, we are emitting so much of carbon emissions that environment has now become at a stake. And we do discuss the environmental Kuznets curve over here. It is an academic representation of how growth and environment are linked, and it is an inverse U-shaped curve, implying that the more you grow in terms of your GDP, your CO2 emissions per capita would go up until you reach a threshold. Only thereafter, the CO2 emissions are going to go down. But for most of the countries, even the developed world, the threshold levels have not yet reached, basically implying most of the time when we are discussing our GDP growth rates going up, simultaneously the carbon emissions are also going up. The global warming in turn is leading to rainfall patterns which are very erratic, and at the same time temperature levels which are going up. And this kind of a fluctuating temperature and rainfall patterns have impacted the agricultural yields. We talk about rice, maize, wheat, jawar, bajra, most of the grains, which are especially grown in the regions where are already emerging economies such as South Asia. Across this, the yield productivities have been estimated to decline. Also, as a result of the climate change, per capita availability of food grains has been estimated to fall. What is going to be the result? Food insecurity. And when we discuss food insecurity in the concept of FAO or IFAD, how they are defining, it's availability of food grain and the accessibility and utilization of food grain. So availability is already going to become a concern because productivity levels are going to go down. They have been estimated. They've already started going down. The second aspect comes in terms of accessibility. And accessibility is in terms of physical access and economic access. When we discuss climate change, if there is a flood, you cannot access that particular area. So even if food grain is available, it's not accessible. Similarly, when your food grain production is going to go down, it will lead to an increase in the price level of the food grain. So your economic accessibility also becomes a question mark. So with availability at stake and accessibility at the stake, we now discuss the sanitization or the utilization part of it. The food, whatever you've consumed, if you're not drinking adequate water, which is clean water, and at the same time, you do not have in-house sanitation facilities and are going for open defecation, it is not going to lead to food security. Most of the women, especially in the rural areas, they do not drink water after sunset because they know then they will have to require to go outside of their homes for the natural call of nature, and it is going to be risky. So when you're not drinking water and you're waiting for a particular time for your for your defecation, the entire system of utilization is going to be impacted. And which gender is it impacting more? The women gender is being impacted more. So there is a nexus between climate change, food insecurity, and the health of the women. And when I discuss the health, it's not again just the physical health, it's the psychological, emotional health of a lady also. So everything is so highly intertwined. The question comes, how do we address it? And in terms of addressing, it's again important to understand business as usual approach cannot go. Active interventionist policies have to be adopted by the government. And at the same time, several opportunities have to be created specifically for the women to enable them become empowered enough so that they are less affected by the climate change. Ample evidence, whether we discuss IFAD or World Bank or UN, most of the studies are showing that the impacts of climate change are disproportionate more so towards the women. When the enough employment opportunities are not available, the men go away, leaving the women behind. And this kind of a migration is again impacting the women much more. So they end up in a worse off situation. And whenever food is scarce, it's again the woman, the South Asian nature of a woman providing food first to the male or the husbands and the children, and then only having the remaining part for herself. So, how do you empower? Most importantly, is education and also taking care of the financial assets. You have to ensure that there is a financial inclusion. And into the mindsets, if we go patrilineality, patrilocality, some of the customs only being done by the men and not women are not being allowed to do that. Added to it, the very fact that we do not have pension or in the unorganized sector, most of the parents in their old age end up living with their male child. So the basic desire to have a male child, in the economic survey of 2017-18, a specific chapter was given, meta preference for a son. And this meta preference for the son has led to so many unwanted girls. They were born only because the last birth was actually not a male child. And at the same time, there have been so many women who have killed their child, girl, as an infant or as a female feticitis, leading to the concept of the missing women. So what are we talking about? We have miles to go. Whatever steps we are taking, a lot more needs to be done in terms of financial resources that are allocated and also in terms of the targeting of these particular resources to a particular segment of the population. And we also in economics talk about the poverty nutrition trap. Once you are into the trap, a big push is required to enable the family come out of that particular trap. At Sri Ram College of Commerce, what small steps we are taking to take care and link the climate change with health? Very happy to share that each of our roofs is solar enabled. We are depending a lot on our in-house generation of solar energy. And during the pandemic times when students are not there, we are generating surplus energy, which is going outside. And it is also turning out to be a revenue generation kind of a model for us. Similarly, we have solid waste management systems where segregation is taking place within the compound and composting is also taking place within the compound. And for the mental well-being of the women, we have psychological counseling and career counseling, which is going 24/7. So we're trying to address these issues in our own small way at the institution level, simultaneously inculcate and educate not just the female, but also the male students which are at SRCC. I'll be happy to speak a little more on this at the time of the question answer session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. You particularly highlighted the vulnerabilities that the women have in our society and belonging to different stratas and the kind of challenges that we face on an everyday basis. I think it's immense and it needs to be looked at from every angle. And there's, as you rightly said, there's still miles to go for us to achieve that kind of liberation or that kind of empowerment for women. Thank you so much for sharing your views.
Yes.
With this, I now invite our speaker, Ma'am Nilima Khaitan. Nilima ma'am is experienced CSR professional with demonstrated history of working in the philanthropy industry, skilled in non-profit organizations, sustainable development, corporate social responsibility, and rural development. She has headed CSR divisions of groups like Vedanta, Hindustan Zinc, Coca-Cola in the past. Ma'am, with your rich experience, if you could enlighten us on what you think is the role of women in health and climate change. Ma'am.
Thank you very much, Madhushri, and thank you, Lanke Foundation. Following after any one of these awesome women would have been hard, and I am following after 5 awesome women speakers. But they made the task much easier. So I'll just quickly make 3 points that I want to say, Matrushi. I think picking from the point, the question that you are posing, what is the role of women in climate change? And somewhere I feel that if we go deeper into understanding the roots of climate change, to me, they are almost linked to the kind of developmental choices that we as the world have made. So the kind of civilizational choices, the developmental choices that were made, which were based on consumerism, which were based on greed, which have all led us in a different way. Richa was hinting towards that when she talked about a more kind of a feminine interpretation of what the future should be like. And I feel if you think that what got us here is also what will get us out of here, that's not going to happen. And therefore, I feel that it is really going to be up to the women, because they are not invested into the current kind of paradigms of thinking or development as much. So I think if the future recrafting, redesigning will have to be done, and that is needed. You need a different paradigm as if you want to really come out of climate change. I think it is women who will have to lead this new kind of civilizational kind of vision that is needed. Otherwise, we are only kind of tinkering at the margins if we do not talk about the foundations of what has gone wrong. So that's one reason why I am a firm believer that if somebody is going to lead the change in a fundamental way, it's going to be women. The second reason why I believe that is, I think I think a lot of panelists have spoken about it. Kachina spoke about it, Seema, Dr. Rashna, everyone's spoken about how women end up bearing the brunt of any of these disasters, whether they are natural disasters, man-made disasters, anything that happens, it is women who end up bearing the brunt, and it is the children, women's children, their offsprings, whether born or unborn, as Dr. Rashna was. So if women are not going to, think about so what happens, but the back end, the brunt of it, how can it just keep getting borne by women? So they will have to take action if they want to change that situation. And the last point that I want to make in this is, Matrushi, that having said this, that women will have to be the architects of a new paradigm, a new civilizational paradigm, and the fact that women in any case are suffering the most from whatever is happening and will continue to suffer. But having said that, all that, I will also say that I kind of in me take objection to when we begin to think about that women will now deliver us. So I feel men can't stand on the side and kind of, business as usual for everything in life and say, "Theek hai, whatever happened, now let the women come forward and solve the problem." That is not going to happen. If this problem has to be solved, the men will have to take as much responsibility for solving this problem as the women have to take. So yeah, that's all that I wanted to say, Matrushi. This was really fascinating to hear, everyone. So thank you very much again, Matrushi, for inviting me.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think with your immense experience, you were able to, kind of consolidate what everybody has shared on the platform and have spoken about the issue. We have now a lot of questions. With that, I open the floor for questions, comments, and queries, suggestions, and experience sharing. The floor is now open for attendees to ask their questions. You can either post your question on the Q&A section, or you can raise your hand and we can have the feature. We do have a feature of allow to talk. So you can directly ask your question or share your views or comments with our panelists and with all of us. So feel free to share your questions, comments. Now, in the meantime, I have a couple of questions that have come up in the Q&A section. One person has shared, Louis M. Fernandez writes us from Philippines. What would be the role of women among the dominant grassroots frontline health workers, specifically midwives and nurses, in terms of reducing maternal and neonatal infant morbidity and mortality? How would these health workers be engaged and empowered towards assertiveness in achieving our SDGs 2030? It's open for any of the panelists to take it up.
I think I will just tell Louis, it's a wonderful question. And you should look at the example of what we have done in India. We have the grassroots female health worker called Asha. And these are the women who go door to door, take care of the pregnant women in the villages, and also take care of the immunization and nutrition part of the healthcare system in India. And they have played a major role in reducing the infant mortality, the maternal mortality, and also malnutrition in our country by many, many points over the last 2 decades. So I think they are the ones, because they are from the villages, they are from the society, and they are the ones who can influence the change that we want in the healthcare sector. So we have done well, though we have a long way to go in India, but we have done extremely well in the last 2 decades by the use of these grassroots workers who we call Asha. So maybe you could look at what India has done and then apply the same in Philippines. Thank you.
Thank
The
you, Dr.
second
Rashmi.
question, Matushri, I think is also for me.
Yeah,
Because it's a very
though not relevant for the webinar, but if you would like to
I think this is a person who has a child suffering from cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is not an environment-related disease. It's a genetic disorder. And you have to take certain precautions so that they don't get infected. So avoid the smoke, avoid places where, they'll be exposed to infections. And rate of survival just depends on how early you have been detected and how much of precaution you're taking, along with some of the medications. So it is very difficult to say which child will survive till adulthood, but we do have many children who do become well-functioning adults. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rashna. Thank you. I have actually a question that anyone can actually answer or try and answer. What can we do as civil society organizations and organizations working in this sector? How can we engage more and more women to join this fight against air pollution and climate change? What specific strategies can be applied, can be used in order to bring more and more women under the purview?
I'm happy to take that, Matushi. I think especially in the clean air movement, you see a lot of interest and a lot of engagement from moms who are clearly concerned about the growth of their children, because air pollution impacts infants and children the most. Obviously, it impacts their development pathways. And so we already see an emergence of women around the world really taking on the issue of air quality. And we see them engaging with schools and in their neighborhoods. And I think the way to kind of expand this is to go where moms are. So schools become a really important place for engagement. I think community centers, playgrounds become a really interesting way of engaging moms. And I think that, I think even on the climate space, I think the sort of urgency around a livable planet for the future generation, I think that's the narrative that really speaks to women, and that's the narrative that really speaks to mothers particularly. And I think that's where we should kind of build campaigns so that women engage on these issues more. But I would say that, I think we need to think about where are the women, where are the moms, where are the young women who see their future. I think through, from the perspective of health and economy, as well as kind of the healthy communities that we want to build for the future generation. I think there are the opportunities where women get engaged quite a bit. But having said that, women are a diverse set of people and population, and I'm not trying to kind of peg them into one certain kind of characteristics, but from my experience in terms of running campaigns, these are kind of the narratives where we see women, especially women in India, really engaging with these issues.
Thank you, Richa. I think Seema ma'am also would like to, you have your hand raised, so would you like to answer that as well?
Thank you. Yes, I think just to add to what Richa is saying, absolutely. I think women are at the center of this, and of course, as mothers and as caregivers, as was mentioned. And I also just want to add one example. So, this whole issue of farmers burning their, rice stubble in northwestern part of India. So CII and the CII Foundation have been working for the past 4 years. At the moment, as we speak, we are working with over 200 villages. And I just want to bring to fore the role of the women in this whole thing. So when we go into a community, there are a whole lot of stakeholders that we work with. Of course, the farmers themselves, the farmer organizations, the panchayats, the spiritual organizations, the schools, and the women and the children particularly. So the men who are taking the decision whether to shift to an alternate technology of not burning, right? They are weighing all the economic consequences, the availability, and we work with the women to talk to the men and say that it's a health question. It's about our future generation, and we must weigh in those parameters as well. So we have actually mobilized more than 4,000 children and women together in these villages, and I think there are more than 4,000 now. Last year was 4,000 men and women who actually work for this cause and go from door to door and talk to the farmers and the men. They go back home also and talk, but they go in the community. So I think women actually, as Richa was saying earlier also, understand how because of their different sensitivities, understand the impact the larger impact beyond the numbers of economics and finances, right? So if we have a conversation with them, they are able to actually join the dots and go back and become our change agents. And we see this in the women at the grassroots level also. I mean, how they join the dots quickly. One another powerful way of taking this out is through the self-help groups. And we do that also. The self-help groups, as you know, are organized, groups, and we work with them and sensitize them on, climate issues, on what they need to do to adapt, what could be the impacts, how to build community resilience during disasters, for example. So I think women can be used, the women workforce, and we call them the women grassroots level change agents, can be used very effectively. So it's a great question you ask. And in addition, I just want to quickly say that the earlier question about Dr. Rachna completely said very clearly, it's the ASHA workers, and I want to add the Anganwadi workers as well to it. ASHA and Anganwadi workers in India both actually work in this space so well. India is, I think, a great example to learn from. Thank you.
Thank you, Seema ma'am. We have a couple of questions coming in from the audience, so I'd like to actually allow them to talk and ask their question themselves. So Anuja, can we have Anuja to ask her question, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Anuja. Hi.
Hi. It was really lovely listening to all the wonderful expert ladies today. Happy Women's Day. My question is that we're all talking about sustainability and clean energy and health. So how can we provide renewable and clean energy solutions such as subsidized, affordable cooking and heating, which is like everyday ritual for every woman in cities or rural India? How can women leaders like you all ensure that this is done at the earliest? Because we've seen so many schemes going on, but the at the grassroots levels, there's no 100% success rate yet.
I would say that I think solutions can only be scaled up when we have good alignment between policy as well as markets, right? And so I think if you're looking at clean tech solutions that can really support women and improve women's health, we not only need a policy that allows for that solution to exist, we would also then, require sort of market forces and the private sector to come in and make it viable and scale it up. And so I think there are numerous solutions we can think about in terms of providing products that can support women's health, may it be clean cook stoves, renewable energy powered technology, and I think there are many prototypes of that kind of technology that exist. But unless we have an environment that's supportive, a policy environment that's supportive, and market players that are able to both provide and make these products accessible, they'll only remain pilots. And so I would then, in answering your question, I would challenge both our policy environment to create a supportive environment where some of these technologies are subsidized. There's incentives for the market force to come in and make these products accessible. And then I would challenge the private sector in this country to innovate and to scale up some of these solutions that go beyond kind of just prototypes and pilots, but actually become the norm in terms of really transforming some of these technologies into clean technologies.
If I may add to that, very well said, Rita. Adding to it, when we see climate change and carbon emissions is a classic case of a negative externality where markets are failing. Basically meaning that the cost to the society is going to be greater than the cost to the personal himself. And therefore, this kind of a thing working towards better quality environment is being underproduced. And what are the ways you want to bring this underproduction towards more optimal production is precisely what has been said. You have to incentivize and you also have to have a taxation. In the corporate sector, for instance, carbon taxes, if these companies are allowed to be paying carbon taxes, is one such step in the right direction. At the same time, it's very important to understand that most of the corporates which are adopting labor-intensive technology are actually less energy-intensive and are more friendly in terms of the environment. But when you subsidize the interest rate at which the corporates can borrow funds from the banks to buy machines, it's actually not going to lead to a sustainable development. And therefore, it is again important to see what kind of expansionary monetary policies we are adopting if it is subsidizing the rate of interest at which these borrowers can borrow to set up their factories. Equally important are green initiatives wherein we are trying to award green initiatives. For example, the Peacock Green Initiative Awards. So the companies are not rated only on the basis of their profitability, but also on the basis of how much green have they gone. So these are some of the steps where both has mentioned, you have to have a carrot and stick. All those who are emitters, you please tax them, adopt the stick approach, and at the same time, try to incentivize the people who are more towards the green energy. And ultimately educating the consumer. He's the final king because we are the ones who will end up buying the product. So is it a refrigerator or an air conditioner which is energy efficient that we end up buying for our homes? Or is it the cheaper product but which is not energy intensive is the product we are buying? So all across, consumer awareness, education is also going to play a very important role. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Richa and Dr. Simrit, for answering that question. We have Dr. Purnima also on board and who would like to ask a question. Can we have Dr. Purnima, please? Hello, ma'am.
Hi, Matushri. Thank you. First of all, very happy Women's Day to you and to all the experts on this panel. I want to congratulate all of them on very lucid presentations this afternoon. So I was struck by the statement made saying that women should not just be beneficiaries, but also solutions. I think, that has been said over and over again, but are we really following that? And I was thinking of an example, and I was thinking about the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwal Yojana to address the household air pollution issue. It's a commendable program that was rolled out by the government, but in terms of implementation, uptake, and sustainably keeping the program going has been an issue. And I was trying to think about, was there something that they could have done differently, maybe involved the beneficiaries also in the solution making? I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
So maybe I can attempt to answer that. I mean, it's a really good scheme actually, that Ujjwala Yojana, and yes, like with any other scheme, uptake is very important. And as you mentioned, there have been numerous studies, and at least I firmly believe that while providing the LPG cylinders at subsidized rate is a very good solution. One size doesn't fit all, and that is really what, when we design schemes, is the most probably the most important thing to keep in mind, right? Every situation, every geography, every community may want to have choices, right? So it's all about giving choices to the people, and in design of those choices, involving the people who would then be, if they have the ownership, they have the buy-in, they would uptake those choices. It's easier said than done. I am very aware of it, especially in a large country like this. And I've had numerous conversations with our policy makers who design different solutions, and they say that you have great ideas, but for us as administrators to define one scheme and say do this and implement it, doing that is much easier. But I think that's where we need to really push the envelope, and we need to say that just because we are not wanting to take the burden of administration or implementation of a different kind and scale, we cannot be creative. We cannot lose the creativity of policy design, right? We need to still be creative in policy design, give those options. And I think it's people like you and all of us who need to keep on pushing this envelope and saying that this is required. For me, the scheme is great, but options needed to be given, and also rollout mechanisms needed to be different for maybe different geographies, etc. That's just a very, I know, high level kind of an understanding, but that's what I would like to suggest. Thank you.
Can I also add to that? And I thought that, oh, sorry, Katrina, please.
Oh, go ahead, please.
No, I've spoken a lot. Go ahead.
So I just also want to say it's really important we move away from the language of beneficiaries, I think, very fundamentally. These are clients, these are customers, and if we need to change our mindsets, and that means giving them what they want and not giving them and superimposing, like Seemaji has said, sort of a one size fits all for everybody perspective. And I think that, some of the more fundamental questions come into also why we haven't actually diversified that basket of choice. Why do we think it's just one thing that can fit for every woman across the country? And I mean, there are some very fundamental questions that have very deep gender norms under them. And unless we address those gender norms, I mean, you have how many thousands of condom brands? Why are we talking about one type of, and even through the government or the government subsidized, right? So we really do need to kind of think about it as, which women are we trying to offer this to, and move away from this language of these recipients that are receiving, engage the private sector to be involved in those solutions. We really need to push our definition of, there's this beneficiary who will be ever so grateful to receive whatever we bestow upon them, which quite frankly, we have now moved way beyond that. And we need to do that with Ujjwala as well, and all schemes. All government schemes. Thanks, Richa, over to you.
I absolutely agree. I was just going to add to this and say that we really also need to think about how the sort of our locus forms of government, people who are actually engaging with the customers or quote unquote beneficiary, are they empowered and do they have the resources to actually roll out these massive ideas and massive schemes, however good they might be? I think is, there's a lot of concentration of power at the federal level, and we see little of that kind of trickling down, especially in terms of financing for some of these solutions at the most sort of grassroots level of government. And I think one of the things for the Clean Air Fund, as we're looking at, how do we really support city and states to roll out solutions on air quality, we realize that the form of kind of government, the urban local bodies, particularly if we're talking about cities, they have very little access to financing and the resources they need to, in fact, implement some of those solutions. So I think, yes, we have these amazing ideas at the federal level, at the national level, but can we kind of start to track down how those ideas manifest into actual action on the ground? And can we start to look at where are those bottlenecks and where are those financing challenges that local governments are facing, and how might we be able to kind of unlock some of those so that local governments have the resources to actually roll out some of these solutions, and beyond kind of looking at not just one solution, but also even that one idea needs to really be tracked to the most basic level and see if it works or doesn't.
Just wanted to add my own personal experience as far as the PMUY scheme. When, one of my aunts, she stays in a village. So I one day rang her up and I wanted to see if it was really, implemented in their villages. And she said, yes, we did get the gas connection and the cylinder at a very subsidized rate. So I asked her, how many months does it last? She said, 6 months. So I said, how come you're managing with one cylinder for 6 months? She said, no, we have it, but we also have wood. So since wood is available, we keep on using it. And then I realized that the basic idea, that why you're giving this source of energy to the women at home. You are what the government has done, it has just implemented the scheme, sort of like a favor to the women in their kitchens, but they forgot to tell them that the benefits of using the LPG versus the risk associated with the use of wood. So that is the reason why, they're saving on money. Whatever subsidy you give, even if they have to spend 500 rupees, they said, okay, we'll spend it in 6 months. We still have wood at home. I'd like to save that 500. So I think the messaging has to come along with the implementation of these programs, because this is one area where I think Lung Care Foundation as a foundation can take up. See, if you have a government which is implementing some policy, some subsidy, then I think these are the organizations who should take up and really tell the people that this is the reason actually how it is, going to help you. And that is where we can negate the effects of climate change. We can negate the effects of air pollution right at their homes. Otherwise, these sort of programs you keep on doing, the government will keep on doling out. But unless the scientific message percolates, it is really not going to work.
In fact, thank you, Dr. Rashna, for bringing this up and all of you talking about this. Just a month, one and a half month back, we have released this video called Chulha under the Lung Care Foundation's banner under the Project Shan, where we are talking about the necessity to shift from Chulha to clean fuel sources, and how, this was something that we discussed in one of the meetings with an officer implementing the Ujjwala scheme. They said the biggest challenge that was coming was people's perception that food cooked on a chulha is much tastier than that cooked on a normal gas stove. So as simple talking about this thing, so we have made this video chulha, which is available on YouTube for all of you to have a look, and we'll welcome everybody to partner this and get this translated into various Indian languages to be showcased and to spread the word across all the states in India, reaching out to every village. I think it'll be a great help. And I would request all of you to do have a look at this. In fact, I'll ask my team to please post a link of the video in the chat box. With that, I now invite Sherry Frosh, who's also a part of the Warrior Bombs group along with Anuja, to please come online and ask your question. Sherry?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Sherry.
All right. I just thinking of women as being, I think in some of the talks you talked about women as being the victim of a lot of climate change and air pollution, and also the mothers of children who have an uncertain future. So there's a lot of anxiety for us once we find out all these things. So, I mean, the challenge for me is, how do people find out all these things? How can we have this awareness program across India, the way we have like an Swachh Bharat program, or we have a anti-smoking program? I mean, why isn't even that being done at such a basic level, considering the enormity of the problem?
I think,
Nilima,
allow
ma'am.
me to, okay.
Yeah, sorry. No, sorry, please, Katrina.
There has been quite a lot of awareness generation, awareness creation. I'll take two instances which I have personally experienced. When my kids were young, I remember before Diwali, at least 20 days prior to Diwali, all shops would be selling crackers. And my son, I would give the money for him to buy those crackers, which were probably very, very polluting. But it never came as a cause of concern, even to me as a parent, that what my son is doing or what I'm doing is not right for the society. The second major, but by the time he was in third or fourth class, so within a span of 5 to 6 years, I realized that the awareness created in the school was so immense that most of the school children actually became crusaders of anti such kind of crackers to be burst during the Diwali time. Another change which I have personally witnessed is polythene bags, because we know for millions of years they remain there and there is no way that they can be disposed of. My own kids have told me when I'm going for grocery shopping, Mama, this is not the bag you're carrying, you have to carry your jute bag. And I'm talking about 20 years from now, earlier than today. And who has done it? The schools have done it. And these are two very strong positive policy interventions through education that I have seen in my own family and also in the complexes in which I'm interacting with. But nonetheless, there are so many areas where much more needs to be done. For example, solid waste management is one such thing. In most of the households today, dustbin is a single dustbin. Everything is thrown in it, whether it's a bottle or a polythene or wet waste or a dry waste. But communities are now changing. And again, I'm speaking from personal. In my own society, the day my own waste is not segregated properly, it is not carried. So it comes back inside my house until I segregate it in a manner which is acceptable for the vendor to pick it up. So we are also getting educated, but yes, point very well taken. The thrust has to be much more because the awareness levels have to be scaled up. But I have seen certain changes and very favorable changes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
I'd just like to add that, awareness is one piece of the equation, but that doesn't necessarily infuse the behavior changes that we're looking for. And I think that's the piece that we, our program, and I know that the government of India, we all struggle with, I struggle with it. I know I'm supposed to segregate trash, and often I will not throw it into one. I mean, I know I should be taking public transport, but quite frankly, how often do I take public transport, right? So I think part of it is also just recognizing that one thing is to be aware, right? And another thing is to actually change the behavior. And that's a long trajectory, actually. So I think the awareness piece is just one tiny step. USAID spends a fair amount of its resources in really trying to promote this idea of awareness right down to different groups, because the other thing is awareness where, among whom, right? There are lots of people that aren't aware at all about some of this stuff. But then also, what kind of sophisticated levers can we use to infuse that awareness and convert it into some kind of behavior change, whether it's about waste segregation, whether it's about burning garbage, whether it's about the variety of things that we could be all doing right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Katrina. I'll just take one last question. I think Louis from Philippines has a couple of questions, and I would just invite him to be asking that question. Hi, Louis.
Hello, once again.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Once again, I'm from the Philippines. So my question goes with it. How women empowered in terms of biodiversity towards environmental sustainability? Would you mind to cite or share your best practices in India? Thank you.
Maybe I can take that, Matashri. So, Louis, very important question again. Climate and biodiversity, as we all know, is very closely linked. In CII, we run a India Business Biodiversity Initiative. I'll just give one example how we are doing this. Of course, businesses across their value chain need to understand what are their dependencies and impacts on the ecosystem services. That is one way to do it, to identify how are we dependent on the services that the ecosystem provides us, right? For example, if you look at agriculture sector, and that's where most of the ecosystem services are taken, right? So agriculture sector has the biggest footprint on biodiversity by the nature of the sector itself. So what we are doing is, and what companies are trying to now do is work across their value chain. So when large companies who are in the agriculture sector are procuring from the farmers, they are working with farmers to see that because of climate change, what are the different practices that the farmers need to adopt, and also how can they ensure that local biodiversity and local native species are actually taken care of. We are doing this as we speak with the spice sector in Kerala, in Western Ghats. As we know, Western Ghats of India is highly fragile ecosystem, and a lot of spices are taken from there, processed, and then exported. So there's also an export implication here. So the best way here is to get the I would say, one, have a policy ecosystem, which is true, everybody talked about it, have the policy direction, but get action from the private sector and business. Because if they are able to see the value in it, and the value is basically they're finding lower cost, less, they're able to hedge the risk, because there's climate variabilities, etc., are so large. If you don't take care of them, you don't know whether you'll get the right kind of crop or the right kind of product and the commodity of the right quality. So once you start to make this an integral part of business, then you will see that uptake of such practices actually becomes much more. And this is what at least we use businesses and their value chains to do much of what was discussed today, whether it's on climate or biodiversity or other plastics and all of the other air pollution things. And I think, of course, policy is important, consumer awareness important, but using business as the action. So to take action at large scale and collaborative action. That's one of the suggestions I would have. Thank you.
If I may add, Matrushi, so I would also like to add that I think apart from the two, segments of society that have been spoken of a lot, and Seema also just mentioned about government and markets, there's another segment of society, especially if you're talking about biodiversity or anything else, which is civil society. And in India has a very, very strong, has had a very strong tradition of a vibrant and thriving civil society. And if you talk about biodiversity, one of the most successful experiments that was carried out in India was joint forest management, where the forest department of the government came forward and partnered with local communities to manage village forests. So there are a lot of such participatory initiatives that have been carried out over the years. Sometimes they have weakened depending on the government of the day, whether there is belief in civil society or there is not belief in civil society. But certainly, Louis, the question that you are asking, I think the climate agenda, my belief is that the climate agenda, whatever we are seeking to achieve in it, will not be achieved if we are only looking at government and markets. If we do not look at civil society institutions, if we do not look at citizen engagement, then most of it will not happen. And in India, at least, I'm saying at one point, I think the civil society organizations have played a very, very, very active role in all of these. So that's what I would add.
I think Nilima has added most of the things, but maybe specifically we could also talk about the public-private partnerships because in the Sustainable Development Goals, PPPs is also now being discussed actively, how to promote various aspects, including infrastructure development and sustainability. And adding to that would be the Bhutan example of going organic. So no longer are we giving too much of emphasis to fertilizers, which in Punjab have actually ruined the soil composition from ideally what it used to be about 4:2:1 for NPK to something like 16:2:1, making the underwater actually so much poisonous that nobody can even drink that. Thank you.
Matushri, just a last comment. I am not into business, nor do I understand business. But one very nice example from Assam, you know, we are a place where we grow tea. And in the last 1 decade, I have heard of small tea growers flourishing in Assam because the demand is from the Western countries for direct organic pesticide-free tea leaves. And I think that is, and it gives a lot of business to these people. And so what has happened is the small tea growers have now gone totally organic. So I think, I mean, I understand it that if you have a demand for the organic market, then you'll probably improve and cause these, you know, also lead to sustainable development of the community. So that's my perspective as a small, you know, lay person as far as business is concerned.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. I know we've overshot our time by about 8 minutes. So I would just take this opportunity to, just highlight some of the things that you have said. We have covered the role of women in climate and health. We've covered the challenges that we face, the vulnerabilities that we faced. But of all this discussion, I can now feel that all of us are all charged up to move on to the next steps. We have often heard the quote by Dr. James, which says that if you educate a man, you educate only an individual. But if you educate a woman, you educate a family and a nation. So let us re-envision this to saying that if we empower a woman to be a climate warrior, we empower a family, a community, a nation, and the world to be climate warriors working for health and climate action. Let us come together. Let us be outrageous together. Let us be hopeful together and help empower every woman around us to lead the fight against air pollution, climate change, and make this planet a healthier place for our children and for the entire mankind. With this, we come to the end of today's webinar, and I thank all my panelists for sharing their experiences and inspiring us today. I would like to thank all the participants for bringing the discussions to life, and we may have many more such discussions and deliberations on our journey to fight the climate crisis. But this is also an add-on. This has opened new vistas. I would also like to add I would also like to thank our partners for the campaign. David, Carl, Mandeep from US Embassy, Anuja, Bhavreen, Sherry from Warrior Moms, Atul Goelji, Wing Commander Chadda sir from Urja, Sudhanshu sir and Akshay from Shriram College of Commerce, Vivek sir, Puneet and others from Bhakta Bharat, our Doctors for Clean Air group, and our Breathe Easy State of School Clubs, and our entire team of Lung Care Foundation, Dr. Arvind, Rajiv sir, Abhishek, Charu, Kritika, Judith, Hamid, Siddharth, Sanchay, Neha, Ashok ji, Abhishek, editor, and without all of whom this program would not have been possible. And of course, many, many, many thanks to our spectacular panelists for being here, for inspiring us, and for sharing with us your invaluable knowledge and information. To all the participants, the recording of this webinar is available on the Lung Care Foundation's Facebook page and will be available on the YouTube page tomorrow. Please do share it with your family and friends and encourage them to join the cause. Thank you so much. Namaskar.